at the center means customer at the center. With the industry catching up on so much needed product-led strategy, the relevance of this panel is only imperative. We are going to hear from experts on product-led onboarding, activation, and retention, the only way ahead. This panel is going to be moderated by Mayuri Govil, our in-house product specialist. She has 9 years cross-business experience along with her entrepreneurial stint. Mayuri looks at everything with keen interest and a very curious lens. Over to you, Mayuri. The stage is all yours now.
Thanks a lot, Akansha. Hi, folks. So after that super fun session by Biswa, I'd like to now welcome you to our panel discussion. This is going to be around all things related to product-led onboarding. Now, onboarding remains the driving factor for whether or not your user activates on your product and continues to use it. So a great onboarding experience can drive better retention, lower CAC, higher LTV, and so on and so forth. Let's see how brands can now build these delightful onboarding experiences with a product-first mindset. And let me introduce you to my fellow panelists who will be sharing their insights on this topic. Yes, we have Vaibhav here, Vaibhav Padlikar, Vice President, Product at Intercity. Vaibhav's strategic product knowledge and expertise has led to the development and growth of the Rail Yatri and Intercity Smart Bus web and app applications. Vaibhav is also an entrepreneur at heart who's co-founded a startup just before being part of the Rail Yatri team. Next, we have Nikhil Naik, an OTT product expert. Nikhil joins us from Singapore. He has over 15 years experience across startups and large business conglomerates. And while Nikhil has managed corporate development, partnerships, and strategy roles, his true passion is really into building direct-to-consumer products. Next, we have Akhil Sharma, who's currently heading the GoBiz merchant-facing app for Gojek. Akhil is a hardcore product enthusiast with over 12 years of product and tech experience across companies like Airtel, Wink Music, Adobe Creative Cloud, and Expedia Global Insurance products. And finally, but definitely not the least, we have Siva Teja, Sales Manager, India and Sri Lanka for AppsFlyer. Siva helps provide custom solutions for Indian and Sri Lankan marketers for their mobile attribution and analytics requirements. He's been a part of this entire digital ecosystem for about 8 years now and derives pleasure in supporting the growth of his customers across verticals. Warm welcome, folks. Let's jump right into our discussion. First question coming up for Akhil, Siva, and Vaibhav. I'll cue you in. Very quickly, if you could give us an idea of the best app onboarding that you guys have personally experienced, and we can start with Vaibhav.
Sure, Mayur. Thanks for the introduction. So, before I name the apps, primarily I will give you the why part of it, why I like certain apps, and how should a product manager think about it structurally. There are primarily, 5 parts that I evaluate a product or when I build a product. See, one is the whenever someone has installed the app, right? Yeah. How quickly they identify the USPs of that particular product. Yes. Let's ignore the discovery part right now, but that's another discussion maybe. The second, after you have seen the USP, how the velocity that Neil was also talking, how quickly you can identify the feature set for which I downloaded or installed the app. And then the third and fourth are login and permissions depending on the use cases and the apps. Yeah. And the fifth, which is the aha or some playing with the emotion or having that emotional connect or a variable reward that we talk in the hook loop. So all these things create or form together a very good onboarding experience, which drive a very good engagement and finally the retention or the booking, whatever we want as per the use cases. So a couple of examples, again, it depends on the use case. For example, in the health app, I really like home workout app, which is, not much of us on the first page, there is a emotion which gets triggered after seeing, I don't know how many of you have seen that, but someone with 6 packs, and there is a good tagline that, perseverance will take you to the goal. And then there are all the features that we have, that you would want to explore. In travel, since Intercity is the travel, I can give example from there. And we wanted to, our learning was there is that you show what all the standardized fleet of buses, what all services we provide. Have a very simple phone number login. There we need phone number for remarketing, for ticket booking, etc. We really don't need permission, so we don't call for it. And importantly, show the important features upfront. That's it. I mean, that's how really we got it. But that's those couple of examples with the thought process there, I hope will help audience.
Awesome, awesome, absolutely. Coming over to you, Akhil, if you could give us some, examples of where you've been really wowed with, onboarding experiences.
Oh, I think great starting, I think, that Vaibhav gave, I think, in terms of the introduction to this entire piece. What I really think about onboarding is it's the first step of engagement journey for a user. So basically, this is where you actually try and cue the user. Basically, you want to set them up for success within your app.
Yeah.
So the idea there is to quickly get them through what is really needed, and then also get some sort of personalized input from them, so that you can actually personalize, improve the experience going forward for them. So I think there are various such examples. I think especially on the music streaming side, as well as I think some great examples. Netflix, everybody knows. But I think Spotify, I really believe has done a very good job of that. So you think about the onboarding there. So it actually starts at the Play Store level itself. So it really creates your entire queue strongly in there. So what is it for? So you see the heading in there, podcast and music at one place, free music highlighted being at that point itself. So that creates the value proposition strongly in the user's mind. And then when you come onto this, look at the queues that people would come into this app for. So generally people share, say, certain song lists, they'll come and download it through the WhatsApp. And then the quick onboarding, where you basically sign up through your email, you then quickly select the music types that you'd want. And I think one interesting feature that I really find, which is kind of differentiator for them, is they actually try and create a more personalized experience right from the word go. So you get them, you choose the artists that you are really looking forward to listening to. And then I think the images, the name, the way the layout is created, I think that creates that very strong connect, strong stickiness for the users. I think having said that, you actually go through a 3-step process, quick onboarding, but then the onboarding actually continues across that entire journey. So when you search, you and do the search for the first time, you'd get specific cues again. So I think very well done and very, very well orchestrated onboarding process there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Akhil. Siva, over to you. What app would you have for us so that we could go ahead and explore, their onboarding experience that you got wowed by?
Perfect. I think most of the apps that Vaibhav and Akhil kind of mentioned are everybody's favorite here, right? I quickly want to share a personal experience. So this was almost last year, where I was out for house hunting, apartment hunting, right? And I did my discovery, everything on the web. And when I was on the move, I kind of understood that, now if I need to get the same results, I have to do the same thing. I have to go download the app, log in, stuff. And during this, I was a little curious to understand, is there any app which was out there which has created a seamless experience for the user? So this is when I found an app called Apartment List. Of course, it's an app from the Valley. What they've done is once a user kind of explores the web, right, they kind of ask all the key parameters that somebody is looking for, what kind of an apartment it is, right? And they don't push a user to log in. They just say, just give us your basic details and period. And once you give your basic details, right, they kind of come back to you with an email and SMS with a very, very specific smart link, right? And this actually makes a magic login experience for the user. So let's say I am on the move now, and I know that I need to go back and look at my search. I just click on this link, and magically, of course, there's a deferred deep linking, which basically happens. But the moment the app opens, the complete experience is personalized. They have their name for me, and all the web search and filters that I've already created on the web are automatically populated for me without the hassle of logging in and creating the experience again. So this I think serves both the purposes. One, it has given a very seamless experience from web to app for the users. At the same time, if you look at the brand perspective also, they would see a higher engagement from day 0 to day 1, right? They have that thing kind of running across from day 0. And I'm very sure we have a case across this as well to see how they have even improved their LTV. So probably I can we can speak this in detail later. Yeah.
Superb, Siva. In fact, you've given me a great segue to the next point, which was, when we take a step back and really think about a product-led growth strategy, we know that the product is at the forefront, right from acquisition to, retention. And then the next question becomes that, hey, now that you're acquiring, users across organic channels, inorganic paid channels, even referral channels, right? Do you really look at designing an onboarding experience based on each of these channels? Is that something that you actively look at, or have you seen other brands doing? And, maybe we could have Vaibhav and Nikhil answer this. And I'll start with Nikhil. He can give his perspective on this point.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mayuri, for inviting me, first of all, to the panel.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of Neeraj and his books and also the newsletter. So I follow almost everything that he writes.
Awesome.
And I also recommend everybody who joins my organization or anybody who's I'm mentoring, I recommend them to go through his books along with a couple of other books, but his books are always, very relevant, not just to product, but overall digital business. So thanks a lot for inviting me to this panel.
Sure.
And since we are talking about the book and the acquisition, let me try and pick up something from the book, which is sort of connected to this question, right?
Sure.
So in this book, when I read this book a few years ago, there was the book introduces us to a model called BJ Fogg model of behavior. And what that model tells you is that for users to take certain action, right? First, there has to be a fine balance between the motivation, how motivated the user is, how high the intent is of the user, and then all the difficulties that he has to go through to experience the product, right? So there is a motivation axis and there is a ease axis. And so in most cases, it has to be, very good balance. Otherwise, you wouldn't get users in the first place to act upon it. And I'll take one very example, something that I think will resonate with everyone. And I'll use a product that I'm not associated with so that it appears very neutral. So you've seen Game of Thrones, right? The show. Now imagine when the Game of Thrones, right, the show launches or the new season launches, a lot of people want to watch it. And some of them know that it's on HBO as an app. Some of them who are not aware might search for it. Some of them are okay to go through the piracy, right? Pirated sites. Now, if you take the example of the behavioral model, it tells you that if the motivations are very high, right? Users wouldn't mind going through like a lot of hurdles. Piracy or the experience of watching the pirated content isn't really efficient, right? You have to go through multiple things. The ad pops up and whatnot. But because it's Game of Thrones, a lot of people would actually go through it, right? If it was some other content, they wouldn't. On the other side, you have a ton of OTT apps where the content is fairly mediocre. They would make your the product so seamless, but they struggle with retention because there is not much motivation to even begin with, right? So there has to be a very fine balance. Now, if you look at onboarding through this lens, you would realize that onboarding is the first place where you have to strike this balance, right? User is on your product, so it's kind of a signal that he wants to interact with your product, but you wouldn't really know how high his motivation is, or you wouldn't really know much about his intent. So that's one part, right? One suspense. The other thing that you want to do, and you can do it to to whatever extent, but you want to know about the user. You want to know about certain interesting things about user, certain essential things about user, so that you can continue to give him a better experience, like a age or a gender, or in case of, let's say, HBO, the type of content that you would watch. But all of this, which is the information that you want, or to the extent that you want to tell him that, hey, other than Game of Thrones, I have 70 other popular shows. All of this user may not be caring about at that point in time when he's onboarding. So you have to have a very fine balance between what you need from user and what is user trying to achieve when he is on your product. So onboarding begins with that. And I think one thing that has happened, and I've been in this space for a long time, one thing that has started to happen over last 5-6 years, and thanks to companies like Siva's company AppsFlyer, we have now very sophisticated acquisition journeys, right? One thing that has happened is that before the user starts to consume your product or starts to experience your product through onboarding, you already know certain things because of the acquisition channel, which are implicit. So what you need to do is that do not increase the cognitive load of a user by asking the same questions again, because you kind of have inferred, right? And you can defer other questions related to it. So acquisition channel would help you filter out questions to make the the whole onboarding process easy, so that the cognitive load goes down. At the same time, acquisition channel also helps you understand a little bit about the intent. And I'll give you an example. Imagine if HBO is running ads on the Facebook, right, before the Game of Thrones shows, and somebody comes through those ads. I would already know, like HBO would already know that, hey, this user has clicked on this ad. And now instead of showing him random onboarding pages, how about if I create a theme on onboarding, which is specific to Game of Thrones, so that I continue to keep the motivation high for the user. And because of that, even if I ask him 3 more questions, he's going to stay on the onboarding. So I think onboarding plays a very essential role, because through onboarding, you can prime the users, give him, get him more excited. At the same time, know about user, so that you can continue to deliver a good experience. Yeah, that's about how onboarding and acquisition I look at it.
Absolutely. I think some great points there. And Vaibhav, just taking your perspective, because you deal with probably every kind of user, right, on the Rail Yatri or Intercity app. So then when you're looking at, acquiring users from certain channels, how does that impact the way you're, designing your onboarding experiences today?
For sure. So I'll extend to what Siva was saying, some of the examples with Rail Yatri also that we do, and to adding to the Nikhil's point. See, before deep diving into that, there are primarily 3 tools that are available technically for the product or for the feasibility point of view. One, we know Shiva mentioned, is a deferred deep link, right, which is a smart link or deferred deep link. People searching for a particular case, and we take them directly onto that screen. That's what is deferred deep link. The second is the UTM referrer, again, bases the source of whatever strings were getting passed. And the third is definitely app indexing. See, SEO is important for discovery and connecting the web to the app. So like in Shiva's example, right? So he did apartment search and that link came up. That is a SEO. And that linking that to the app is primarily a mixture of both deferred deep link and also the app indexing. But I mean, to come to the Rail Yatri use case, what we are really top in terms of some of the train info sections, like train status, right? Train status on say Gitanjali Express or Rajdhani Express. Now, if what we try to do is we try to convert this web user into an app. So once this user comes onto a particular section onto website, we have an option for him to go into the app. Now we already know the context of the user. Someone is going from Delhi to Lucknow. I would want to open that page onto Rail Yatri app. So that train status, when someone gets into the app, that page directly opens up. So it's a pretty seamless experience. He just has to install, or he or she has to just install the app, and it will take them directly. And there are various examples as well. We run ads for, say, Delhi to Lucknow bus ticket booking, because our intercity bus run on those routes. And if there is an app which is indexed, put to that link, that app will get launched. Those are certain examples, but I recommend that you try it out. And there are various use cases that will happen. So I recommend everyone hearing. So these are the 3 tools. I'm sure the innovation can happen basis these 3-4 things, and maybe Siva can add more. I'm sure AppsFlyer is doing wonders there. But all these tools. So we also looked at branch.io along with AppsFlyer. Those tools help up, and plus Firebase. So I don't know, maybe I hope I answered that.
Absolutely. No, for sure. I think it's a great perspective, because now you know the hard work that goes behind when I'm searching for a route and I actually land on that page on the app. We know the thought process behind it, right? The teams that are working behind it. But yeah, it brings me again to a very interesting aspect that Akhil had touched upon in one of his previous answers. And Akhil, I'll probably direct this to you first. you said a very important thing that onboarding starts even before actually downloading the app or coming onto the web, right? It can start within the App Store itself or the Play Store. I'd like to take your perspective because currently for Gojek, I know you're working more on the merchant side of business. And for them, maybe onboarding doesn't start on the Play Store. So what would be your thoughts around, how you're figuring out where does the onboarding funnel start for such use cases? And if you'd like to shed some light on the other, the Play Store aspect as well.
Sure. I think when you talk about GoBiz platform, the app that we've created for the merchants, I think it's also a super app ecosystem that it really works on for all the user needs. So primarily tackle, say, Go food merchants, Go Mart merchants, a lot of different use cases, even QR codes, people who are using different types of payment channels as such. So actually, when you look at various segments of merchants, I think the needs of each of them are very, very different. When you look at a super app ecosystem such as Gojek or GoBiz, for example, it's really important to identify what each user is going to be doing at, say, when they, what are the core motivations that they land up onto your app with. So I think it does start to some extent for us as well, though it is still transactional based use cases. But again, it also starts at Play Store for us. So the important element of priming the user that I talked about, say, you basically create the value proposition upfront. So people who would get into the, say, merchants who would want to get into the GoBiz ecosystem, how would they, what are the core values, core functionalities that we offer to them? So we basically see a list of all those options, what Go app is all about. And that's where I think where our Play Store onboarding is kind of limited at this moment. But I think primarily the onboarding for us really starts with first type of interactions that happen for merchants. So for example, with the first transaction that they get. So setting up the user for the first transaction, and then from there on, taking them on to the next phase of their journey. So we want all of our merchants to be productive and also eventually say grow their business in the meantime, also help Gojek, GoBiz ecosystem grow from that perspective. So we try and get them in terms of an efficiency improvement lifecycle curve, wherein we try and engage them on a regular basis in terms of what kind of promos they could use, what promos make sense at a particular point in time, education related to what features you could use on the app itself to actually make your journey very, very easy from that perspective. So I think really a targeted workflow based on the segments that they come in, the kind of interactions that they do. I think that is what we strive for at this moment.
Interesting. And interesting that both Weber, when you spoke about priming, because that brings us to this entire topic around, and I know Nikhil is smiling because I'm going to talk about something that's very close to his heart, the human psychology, behavioral sciences and cognitive biases. For our audience, just to break it down, and Nikhil, you guys can correct me, cognitive biases are just systemic errors in the way humans think that end up actually impacting our decision making. But interestingly, product and growth teams have been exploiting cognitive biases and sort of ensuring onboarding flows are built around it. So I take the liberty to ask Nikhil and then Siva for a very different perspective, but starting with you, Nikhil, how have you looked at the entire space of cognitive bias to design, an onboarding experience?
Yeah, so I think the whole field of psychology related to products and especially what we do is evolving as we speak, and it's very interesting. It's just that it gets a little bit academic if we start to use jargon. So I'll try and keep it very light, right? So there are few things that happen while the user is onboarding on any product, like the user is joining any product. And while I spoke about the balance that we need to maintain between the motivation and ease, there are certain very good opportunities through the cognitive biases that we can see while the user is going through this process. I think one of them is I'll take example of another company to explain this principle of commitment bias or investment, right? If you look at Twitter, right? Twitter is like amazing platform. I use it for a very specific thing, but I've been using it for a long time. In the life of Twitter as a company, there was a time where it was very rocky, right? People weren't sure about what's going to happen to Twitter. There was Facebook and Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and then there were others who were, cannibalizing on what Facebook, what Twitter was doing. So one thing that ensured that people do not go away from Twitter is the investment that people had in Twitter, right? If I'm an influencer, I have, like, if you look at Amitabh Bachchan's Twitter handle, right? He actually puts a number to his tweet. Like he has like over 1,000 tweets so far, and also the followers. So the type of investment that a user does in the product to personalize it or to make it special for him is extremely important, because that kind of then affects your churn rates and affects the retention. While onboarding, we should also consider some of these things which are slightly appear to be beyond onboarding. So take an example of a product which is asking users, and especially if we know the user intent is very high, and if we ask users to let's say personalize the product by taking few steps, he is going to feel more for the product. He'll feel more connected to the product, which is which is called user investment in the product, and a commitment bias, because now he has consciously made certain choices and we would want to justify those choices, right? So that, I think, is one great example of how you can use a psychology to the onboarding. I'll give you one more example, because onboarding shouldn't appear like it's only at the beginning of your journey, right? We go through similar activities like onboarding. You call it onboarding or something else, but you go through activities where you onboard a user for a feature, right? You might want to educate a user and have him experience a feature. In the companies that I used to work for, we had freemium products, right? Where we had to give users a free product to begin with, but then after a while we would try and nudge him to move on to paid product. And there we used to use something very wisely. Take an example of a product like a music product, right? Music on demand, where the subscription, let's say, and I do not know the exact pricing, but let's say the example, 100 rupees a month is the subscription of a product. In India, at least until 5 years ago, it was very difficult for people to agree to pay some for content, right? They would go through a tremendous amount of purchase pain before they actually pay you. But if you want to prime a user, if you want to anchor around something for a user, when he's paying you, you would want to not talk about the fact that it is 100 rupees a month. Rather, you would talk about it's a 1 Starbucks coffee or 2 Starbucks coffees, right? Which he can readily agree that, hey, 2 Starbucks coffee, maybe I'll skip, but I get the whole month, like with 30,000 songs or whatnot. So that's a very good example of how you can juxtapose something which is easy to digest and then get user to pay you, because now the comparison is completely different, right? So the purchase pain is suddenly reduced. You can take the reverse example. We used to do, I remember at ViewClip, and we had a lot of telecom partnerships, right? And telecom players would give our product for free, right? So like if you're an Airtel user or Vodacom user, you would get access to our product for 6 months. Now, while that's amazing, right? You tap into a lot of users, and users don't have to pay from their pockets, so you get users for free. Essentially, there is a risk attached to it, right? People start to devalue your product. They think, hey, it's free, right? So free, to matlab, there is no commitment bias, right? But then you can prime again those users in a way that, hey, what you're getting is a tremendous. So, for example, the music case, right? Now, the value that you got from Airtel, which is, let's say, in this case, 100 rupees for 30,000 songs, which means per song it is 1 paisa, right? In Indian parlance, which is amazing value to me. So now, even if it is a product is free, I know that there is a FOMO because it's for 6 months, and I also know that I'm getting amazing value. So I suddenly start to value that a lot, and that can be achieved through the onboarding, right? So there are few principles of psychology that we can take out of academics and apply to the real product management, right?
I'm sure, because if we go ahead and see all the 168 biases, then I think we probably just keep going in that loop. Just to take a different perspective from Siva here. Now I'm asking you this question from a very B2B perspective, Siva, but feel free to take this into a loop that you would want to. Do you see biases also playing a very important role when you're designing an onboarding flow for, say, your B2B customers?
Yes. So I will take this both B2B and B2C flow because I really like the topics that kind of Nikhil touched upon. I want to just kind of add on to those as well.
Sure.
I think one of the most interesting thing is the products that we see today, so plain and simple, but there's a lot of thought that is really going behind to create every single brand page, right? One of the things that I would want to talk, probably this applies for B2B, B2C, and almost all, is basically a anchoring bias, right? Whatever we see first, right? The first thing that we see is what we perceive. Either you read about the top 5 reviews, the first 5 reviews that you read is what makes your opinion about. And even this happens on a pricing related game as well, right? The moment you see a price of a product, be it a subscription for a B2C or a B2B, the first price that you see is what anchors in your head. For example, going back to Nikhil's topic, the first price that you see, let's say it's $1,000.
Yeah.
That's what is perceived as an anchor, that this product cost 1,000. This is $1,000. The next one right next to it is rephrased in a much better way, that you can do this at, let's say, $20 per month at an annual billing. Again, there is a discount which is added, which make believe the customer, you know what, there is a bargain and a value that I have kind of got from this.
Yeah.
Right? This is a kind of anchor that is also placed to lure users to kind of subscribe to one of the other channels.
Yeah.
And the interesting fact about this is there are brands which are using it the vice versa also. And this is amazingly done by Apple. This is every time I speak about it, I kind of see how tactically they use this on every user. Every time they launch an iPhone, just think about it. They say our standard rate is $699. We are not increasing our rate. So now there is an anchor in the user's head. This is $699. Now the next best option is $899. Now, as a user's mindset, you think about it. Here, this is only $200 more, but this is not $900.
Yeah.
They play around with this is so amazing, that how the product managers kind of run this is really great. And again, taking back on to Nikhil's topic, looking at Amitabh Bachchan's Twitter followers on a commitment bias, right? There is again things like confirmation bias or bandwagon, where people tend to do what others do.
Yes.
And it is kind of also inbuilt, right? So if you look at the onboardings today, it says, you know what, there are 1 crore people who are already using this app, which kind of implies that, you know what, there are already 1 crore people there and you're late to the party. Come on, right?
Yeah.
So this is even you look at brands like Meesho, they have gone a step ahead and started multilingual onboarding process where they reaffirm users why they should join a brand, right? I think there are a lot many biases that we can kind of go on about, but yeah, these are.
Yeah, I think very relevant topic there. So I think all of us as product managers somewhere would have experienced these. So I couldn't stop myself but add to this. I think say I've seen this being done at varying say different places as such. So you would look at say something as a SaaS product, say Creative Cloud from Adobe, for example. The way we primed our users was exactly very similar. So we had our 3 offers, one with all the Photoshop plans together, one only with Photoshop, and then other with say a combination of Photoshop and Lightroom. So basically, based on that, the anchoring was really established, and we always saw that the one with the highest, say people actually bought the combinations much more than say the single value products, because then they could see that there's a discount available, and eventually Adobe actually gained from that perspective. We got more revenue, I think. From a user perspective, user also got more value out of more apps in there. But I think I've seen this across apps. Some of the anchoring biases, I think things that you talked about, Nikhil, we applied them directly at Expedia as well. So we were selling insurance, one of the most difficult products to sell, I think. And at some point we did some A/B tests around, say insurance costing less than a movie ticket for you, travel insurance. And the test actually did pretty well for us. I think really very interesting topic from a product perspective. And I think onboarding needs to be, whenever you're really thinking of engagement, really
Yeah.
thinking of biases.
Yeah. I think we could have a completely different panel only on cognitive biases, and we would still need more time to sort of cover everything. But in the interest of time, one last question from my end before I jump in and take a whole lot of questions we're getting on chat. I think this one holds true for everyone, and it's around the metrics of retention, right? How is it that you're measuring it today, right? Is it just your day 7 retention that counts, or day 30? Is it your DAU by MAU ratio? Is it your NPS or CSAT scores? What is it that's telling you that, hey, onboarding was successful and hence your user also ended up getting retained? We can start with you, Akhil, since we're already on screen, and then we'll go to each of our panelists one by one.
Sure, Mayuri. I think when you talk about retention, again, really you need to understand the high value actions that you wanted to drive, and basically whether people are continuously engaging with them. For more complex apps which have multiple products, for example, at Expedia or even at Gojek, you'd want to see whether there's been a cross-pollination as well. So along with these 7 retentions or monthly retention cohorts that you'd see, you'd probably also see whether this the person has returned to buy another product from the same group. For example, say a flight product in this case probably got into a newer use case. Did they use promo? Did they actually buy any service from GoFresh, for example? I would say that is another thing that we really look at. And I think from an overall retention cohort perspective, I think important aspect is to see that continuous engagement with the app as well. So they may not actually always drill down to a purchase or a transaction at the end, but whether they are coming back to the app or even seeing the product details pages on a regular basis is something that would I'd probably consider as that.
Sure. And if we come to Vaibhav, Vaibhav, your thoughts around the whole metric we are all chasing constantly, retention. How are you measuring your top 2 retention metrics that probably make the most sense to you right now?
So NPS CSAT is definitely important for us. See, being in travel, it is important that you have given value in your first purchase or first transaction, whatever, be it a paid transaction or a non-paid. If you help users to save on money or time or anything, right, they will recall you, and during your next travel, they will remember you. That has been our way to think about it. So, all those D7, D1, they are somehow becoming vanity more and more rather than the repeat purchases from particular channel, etc. So that is how we look at it right now. I will also, just add onto it, maybe to the extending to the previous point, right? There is a bit of a bias in business managers or product managers also. We are not like averse to that, right? We are also humans. So one of the greatest bias which I have seen is measuring these metrics, and the particular there is the confirmation bias. We tend to see only what we want to see at times. So you define your metrics, but at the same time, just don't look at it, see everything around it. So there's no particular 1 or 2 metric. Look at what more. So hearing your customer, customer empathy is the biggest thing, be it whatever metric you choose. So look at beyond what you have already identified.
For sure. And just because we have too many questions and I'm being asked to pick 2 to ask you folks, I'll probably direct one to Siva. Siva, we have a question. What should be the one thing during onboarding for an early stage bootstrapped startup, considering you can't spend a lot on fancy graphics and features? And guys, please feel free to chime in your points as well.
Perfect. So I think the whole concept of product-led onboarding came in because everybody wanted to drive more focus towards how a user can kind of get more value from the product than having to use a lot of external nudges to make sure that the user use the product, right? Yes. So one of the most important thing that I would call out for any startup is how can they, again, not measuring everything, but how can they kind of understand what is the most correlated metric that can drive to the value of a user. For example, if we perceive this is as an e-commerce brand or let's say a music app that we've been talking about, the most important metric for them might be a user subscribing to their service, but what are the key matrices on onboarding that you should look at for this to happen? Might be, again, there is an option today where a user would communicate back his thoughts to the app. For example, are they willing to give you information on what kind of music they want to listen, right?
Yeah.
Are they willing to tell you what languages are they interested in? So this is the core metric, and there's also an option to skip every time. So
Yes.
this is exactly what a startup should understand. Who are these users who are actually feeling these key interest points for them, and how do they kind of nudge them to the next step? The most logical next step for any startup would be, how many songs are they adding to a playlist?
Yes.
Probably this is the next most important step before they even go for a subscription or for a search. There are also, this is again one of my favorite things that I always tell, that users see uninstalls not only because of the app experience, but might be of the content that they're searching for. There might be users who are coming onto your app and searching for very specific things, and then they're dropping off.
Yes.
Right. So for a startup, these are the most important things, or the value discovery as soon as possible, because value discovery can't be late in the funnel. It has to be on the top of the funnel.
Yeah. Yeah. So Siva, would you?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, if you look at the current retention metrics for this 2020 that we have lately measured, this will put a lot of thought back into the product managers. How do we upscale this? There is a dip from 19 to 20 already, and 23% is a day one period. That's the retention that we're looking at. And if you talk about day 30, it's 1.6% max.
Yeah.
So yeah, food for thought for all.
Yeah, I'm sure. And like I said, it's such a hot topic. Everybody knows that at the end of the day, the one thing you're chasing is retention. And Nikhil, this question is again from our audience. We have a question on, how do you measure why are users retaining on your product? Why are they on your product versus why are they not moving out to your competition? How do you measure the why behind retention?
Yeah. So it really depends on what product are you operating. But let's take an example of a simple product. Let's say OTT. Right? I've had some experience with the OTT products. Now, one thing that I champion a lot in any organization that I'm connected to is actually two things. One is having a very good experimental framework, right? Because product management is, while there is a lot of science, there is always going to be a trial and error. Yes. And what happens with trial and error is that it depends how teams are, how capable are they to digest the failure and come up with even better experiment, right? So unless you have a very good experimental framework, it's difficult to keep on, doing the experiments to find the right spot, whether it's onboarding or whether it's any other part of your product. So horizontally, I think getting experimental framework is very important. Also, something which is closely connected to retention is, and the reason I'm saying it is because I could recall how our meetings went related to retention, because retention is a favorite topic of everybody, including businesses product. Is we eventually started conducting a lot of meetings based on data, which was amazing, because now you have fairly good data scientists to a level where it can reveal a lot that you would with your eyes cannot identify. For example, for an OTT product, I'm sure that is true for a lot of other OTT products like a Netflix or a HBO or View, is there are certain lead indicators, right, of retention. And I'm sure the products like e-commerce product, there are different lead indicators, but you will always have lead indicators that you can come up with anecdotally by talking to users, but also through data. And you need to identify those indicators and then really focus on how to achieve those indicators as early as possible. So I'll give you one example. For the first 7 days, if you do the following 3 activities, you would get D30 retention doubled, right? And what are the 3 activities that we discovered is open rate, right? We had to ensure that a user is coming on our platform at least 3 days in the first 7 days. He has to spend at least 30 minutes on our platform in the first week, right? And he has to sample as in try out different content, at least 10 shows on our platform in first 7 days. If he does that, he is already in the top 10 percentile of our retention curve. So that we could get to, not just because analytically it sounds really intuitive, is also we ran a lot of models to figure out what was the lead indicator for a retention, because retention typically can be measured at D1, D2, but then there is a curve, right? You wouldn't really know. The feedback loop for you to improve on is very long. So you need to find out what are the early indicators of the user from retention perspective. So I think that's important activity for everybody to work on, because retention is essential for any business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's it, folks. That's the time we had. We've tried to come to the end of the session, keeping in mind, the other sessions and keeping in mind the time. But, personally, it's been great. Thank you so much, all of you. Your insights on this entire product-led onboarding, acquisition channels, Play Store experiences, our favorite cognitive biases, it's really been very enriching, I'm sure, for our audience as well. Thank you again. I will now bring back Akansha to take all our audience through the rest of the sessions. Thanks, everyone.